Okay, we're back with our conversations. Today I have the lovely Fawn here to have a conversation with me. Um, and so I'd like to just ask you, Fawn, if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Sure. My name is Fawn Montanye. I moved to Dorset, Vermont from Saratoga Springs about a year and a half ago. I accepted a position with the Vermont Recovery Network and relocated my family and I out here. The Vermont Recovery Network provides the data platform, technical assistance, and a range of supports to the 12 peer based recovery centers throughout Vermont. And we're really privileged to work beside the peer professionals who are advancing access to recovery from addiction in their own communities. New York State has a bunch of recovery centers as well. And peer based recovery has touched my heart and in ways that nothing else really has. So I was very excited to get the invitation to come and talk all things recovery today with you.
Thank you. I have to say that work is much more not work when it's something that we're really passionate about and have a great attachment to, right? Like I don't consider my work at all. I feel like I'm very lucky to do what I enjoy so much.
I do the compliance measures of keeping a time card and submitting things, but the work, and especially if I'm talking with other people or helping from a peer way, like that's not it's not to me it isn't work, number one, and I don't want money for that. That's not why I do what I do. I'm qualified and certified to do that as a paid individual, but that's part of my, drive. That's part of why I'm able to keep my recovery in the status that it is today, is because I don't care what time it is, or if you're in Alaska or Florida, if you need help and you have my number or somehow find my number, I'm going to answer and we're going to talk.
That is so amazing, and I'm so happy there's people like you that are doing this work. Because when somebody finally reaches out, they're not coming from a pretty place, are they?
No, it's the lowest of the lows. Not everybody has, a low bottom debacle, but, the common thread is we've done a number on the relationships that we hold. So the people that are normally there that we would turn to seeking support are no longer able to be that person for us. We've kind of, overstayed our welcome in some areas, if you will. When you deal with people in recovery, it's just like, it's not a pity party. It's completely compassionate and kind, but very real. Like, oh, I relapsed, I need help, or maybe it's the first time. And those are my favorite. That's my movement. Is people coming into it the first time, and really wanting it and staying there. It's not everybody's story for sure, but to be there for people when they're not at their best, and it's very it's just humble. It's grace. I was touched by grace over 4 years ago, and I continue to be touched by grace on a daily basis. And to keep that, you need to be able to convey that and be that for somebody else.
Yes, yes, we all need that in our lives, especially because really the hardest, I know for me, the hardest thing was saying the words out loud to someone else, which then would hold me accountable, right? I remember walking from one end of the house to the other and sitting down in front of my husband saying, I can't drink anymore. I can't do it from this day forward. It can't happen. And, it took me all these scenarios in my head about, how would he react? What would he say? Where do we go from here? And in the moment, it was as simple as he looked back at me and said, well, I don't have to drink either. Let's do this.
And but for you, as the trepidatious as it was in carrying that, like, after you said it, do you remember those seconds after when you said it and how you felt?
Yes. 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 It was like I can feel it again, right? My shoulders, just thinking back on it, got lighter again physically in my body. Yeah. I tell people now I have days, man. and it's been 16 months for me. Um, and there has only been a handful of days where I've really wrestled and said, oh, if there was a day where I was going to pick it up again, this would be the day. But most days I happily wake up and know that really, I feel deep in my soul, there is nothing in this world that is important enough to make me take another drink. You know?
I remember being in rehab, and one of the first things in the hospital, we were in a group, and the woman that was facilitating the group said, you know, as part of her, they called them relapse prevention plans then, one of the scenarios was, if your mom passed away, would you need to pick up? You know, and at the time, those of us that were, you know, not ready, or, you know, very contemplative, or, you know, not ready to say there isn't one scenario, couldn't even put their minds around, you know, getting through the passing of somebody in a sober state voluntarily. And, you know, now I couldn't imagine, you know, I can imagine, because I did it. You know, I was, you know, my use was short and awful, and, you know, not, you know, a great number of years, but it was damaging. And I remember the difference of going through the grief process, you know, drinking, and, you know, the grief process today. And feeling feelings is hard, but it's nice that I can do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I can remember when I was going through my grief with my late husband, um, his passing, which was fast and furious. But before I speak to that, let's speak about the times, because like my usage was, I had my first beer at 9.
Mhm.
And that was at one of my cousin's high school graduation barbecues. And my father was a very active alcoholic. And I followed him around begging, come on, let me have a beer, let me have a beer, until he had enough that he couldn't stand it anymore. And he handed it off to me and said, here, now leave me alone.
Yep.
That was my first beer. But there's been a couple of times in my life where I have stepped away but never just for me, about me, until this time. One time when my first marriage was putting me up against a wall, and I stepped away. And oddly enough, that was something he threw in my face when he left, was, you were a lot more fun when you were drinking.
Aren't we all?
Right? That was me. I was like, yeah, well, everybody is. And the second time was my mother ultimately died of cancer. But it was like 5-6 years. But when it got to the point where I knew there was no hope, I stopped drinking so that I could be present for all of that for her. And then my late husband, it was fast and furious. It was 8 weeks between diagnosis and death. But the day we knew the diagnosis, I said, okay, put it aside. I want to be here for you. So, and that grief process, you know, I kept saying to people, the only way I'm going to get through it is to get through it. Like, I can't sit here and wait for it to go away. It's not going to go away. If I don't walk through this process, if I don't go through this process is still going to be standing right in front of me, waiting for me. Right? Like it's your job. So all that being said, we're coming into the season of triggers that do not hit us any other time of year, right? Where it's just, I sometimes feel like, depending on who you're gathering with, any number of landmines are waiting for you to hit you. And how do we cope? How do you suggest coping? Because we cope all the rest of the year. I know that for me personally, it's very unique, these triggers. And I know they're coming every year. And I think, oh, it'll be fine. But, you know, they just change the game a little bit every year. And that trigger just gets to a different calibration. And then it hits you sideways again.
It's you're so, spot on with the assessment. And in recovery, the blessing is really that we know, and those that have, good and strong recoveries, know to be prepared, because you're never going to know when it hits. It's not this daily struggle, after the first, couple of weeks and months of, am I going to drink, not drink. It's really those, when things have been going so good or so copacetic for so long, it's, there's that sudden upheaval. And so we hope that the replacement of drinking has become with growth, and personal self evolution. And the natural byproducts of that is resiliency and coping mechanisms. You learn to sit with things for a little while. You learn to prepare yourself for what you think might happen, but really knowing you're preparing yourself for the unknown. And when you put enough time and energy into yourself during the days around those high trigger days, everybody has a threshold. And we do a lot of work on this in just my general life. You have to have a healthy amount of stress to be in a position to thrive on the norm. So you're not always, at this, side of a threshold where it's just kind of lackadaisical. As a norm, we're all kind of just over that halfway point with the normal trudge. It's being able to monitor when we go into that sudden, spike, how to get it back. And a lot of it is self-awareness, and being able to acknowledge, not denying that it's happening, number one, right? Like, so let's just say it is real. And, do I have a few people that know me well enough that I can call? And have I put the mechanism in place to say, hey, you know, whether you have a sponsor or not, close friend, close cousin or whatever, I might need to call on this day because, XYZ. But then having those people, because you can call them anyway when, you have a flat tire, or forget to put gas in the tank, and the other things that don't come with the preparation of. And this year is so different, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's in
Oh
my
my
notes.
gosh. So it's like, it's not just the normal, like, let's get the meal ready and prepare that and learn how to make gravy when you're not drinking a glass of wine. How about now we're worried about what's going on in all of our loved ones' homes, and the fact that we can't be with them and we want to be there. It I'll back up to what you said. You were able to put down because you wanted to be present for someone else. All I hear is that you recognized you wouldn't be present and remember. You wouldn't have been there. You knew that about yourself and you gave that to yourself. So let's just, plug that in, because that's kudos to you. That's what it was. And we have to be able to do those things whether it's holiday time or not. We have, so little control around the grand scheme of things. It's, the hula hoop, put your hula hoop on and stay in it, and do what you can to help those outside of it. But within it, it has to be a really healthy space, or else, the hula hoop falls and it's down at your ankles, and it's not going to serve you any purpose. You can get up in the morning and meditate, or, do whatever discipline and routine there is. But the bottom line is purpose, community, and connection. Do any of us, recovery or not, have those things? I don't care if you're alcoholic, if you like to smoke a joint, or if you're blowing lines. Even if you have hurts, habits, or hangups, those are qualifying events, because those of us in recovery are lucky enough that we got a substance that we could name and blame and identify, and it was tangible. It's the rest of the world out there that doesn't have that, but still goes bananas with their stressors and triggers and other things, that don't have at least, that fundamental, oh, I know why I drank, and everything else, so I can avoid some things, and I can avoid the things that I know trigger me. I can prepare for the things that aren't going to come, and be able to identify boundaries around what I'm placing myself into. And then, there's, the out. I'm going to go, I'm going to, do it, but I'm going to have a car, or I'm going to have, somebody to call, or a ride on the ready to, you know, help me go. But those, that's the three very realistic ways of looking at things.
Right. That was something I got used to because I didn't know until I was fully out of it this time without focus, like, a marriage failing, a mom dying, or a husband dying. This time was different. And I was face to face with the fact and the knowledge that I have severe social anxiety. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. And again had a conversation with my husband. Okay, we're going to our high school reunion. Like, it was 2 weeks after I had stopped drinking. I said, we're driving an hour and a half to this. I need to know that if it gets to a place where I say, honey, we need to go, I mean, we need to go. I need to know that you're going to do that for me. You're going to pull that trigger so that I'm not spinning and stuck. And he was like, really? I was like, yes, really, please. It didn't happen, but probably it didn't happen because I knew I had that safety valve.
Hmm.
Any moment, if I felt like I needed to run, I could turn to him and say, honey, we need to go. And we would go. Um, but even, going out to live music events, which pre-COVID, we do an average of 2 times a month. Um, Even that was, it was people felt like they were on top of me, and getting through those things sober enough times where it became normal again. Right. Even just going out to dinner with my husband. Like, we used to go and sit at the bar, watch TV, chat with the bartender, right? Now we're sitting at a table, no alcohol involved. We didn't know how to do it at first. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? But it was like really awkward for a certain amount of time. Now it's like nothing again because we've learned how to do it. But there's so many things that you don't think about, like, and they could potentially be the things that make you change your mind about what you're trying to do for yourself, right? And let's come back to this year has been a year. This year has been a decade. Um, so anybody who's had past trauma that filters into our addictions, right? And now, if we could all understand that all of us right now are living through trauma, right? This whole year has been trauma for everybody. And that's not overstating the emotions, I think. So all these layers of trauma, that are past trauma, the current trauma, everything that's happening, can you speak to that at all and unravel that for us a little bit?
You got to tend to the soil. I fall to our, Native American kind of recovery philosophies on this one because, not there's enough people I know that, are very big proponents of trauma was not a part of my usage. It's a low number. It's a low number, but it's out there. And, I can't, be one of the people that say 100% of, addiction related issues are trauma related. However, there's variations of trauma, and trauma does not have to be I was molested or raped or I went through some big life event. Trauma could be my parents divorced, or I hurt my knee playing, elementary softball or soccer and was on, prescriptive medication at a young age and exposed to something that, set off my neurology, and like I liked that. There's so many different variations of what trauma is, but you look at, this is more going to be along the lines of that generational trauma. And we look at what happened with Native American populations as they were Americanized, and how they've had to, it was traumatic for these children to be removed from their villages and have their hair cut and removed from their families and then reinstored and everything else. And we see that, the impact isn't felt immediately. It's like the generation after, and maybe after that, the Holocaust was another example where we've, kind of seen this. So um, I'm really appreciative that it takes all kinds of kinds to make the world go round. And there's some people that are really passionate about ensuring that, we value that this time is traumatic for everybody. Because for as many people that are was going to deny that that's the reality. There will be those of us, on the sidelines, kind of tending to the soil and looking at the children of today and the older folks of today and making sure that there's some more community and connection woven within there, and that we're checking in on people, and that, oh, I'm doing okay isn't enough. Like, can we get somebody to say, 2 or 3 sentences, a few times a week. Check in on people. Trauma is, you can help in so many different ways as people are experiencing it. And that connection of just having somebody reach out and not knowing that it was coming at that time can be a brief intervention. There's beautiful things in recovery centers and in the clinical world today of, lots of ways to deal with a post-traumatic stress disorder, and very natural, effective ways to deal with things, not medication related. But you have to acknowledge that you have it, and then ask for the help and go and get it. So in the meantime, there has to be enough of us people just, on the sidelines, knowing that, yeah, this is, we see it coming. And there's a dynamic amount of people in the health and wellness world, in the holistic space, in the clinical space, that are, keeping, this very much in the forefront of where our attention needs to be, because it's not over. There's still going to be a period after this.
Correct. Yeah, and I've been saying for months now, like the children, like the very young children who, like, what kind of trauma is this inflicting on them that they can't hug people, see their little friends and stuff, like, and their brains are so, not formed to handle this kind of information or process it in any way. And I'm thinking, oh, we're going to have an entire generation of really broken children, right? Like,
And I'm all about, family unification, and it's great with the white picket fence, and if you have the time, and many of us do. But, let's get real. Our kids see exactly who we are in our homes, and our kids know if we've been day drinking, and our kids know if we went out and we had a phone call that was disruptive or disturbing with an unhealthy individual. And our kids are very well aware of when we're tense and when things are off. And if there's, homes, and many of us have homes that are not, picture perfect 24/7. And if there's young children in there, these are more hours, where they're subject to that without that community outlet, a space to be creative, a space to bond with other people, to learn, those safety nets. And it's unfortunate, but it's no different, Dawn, than so many of us. It's just a different time. Any of us that, currently have any issues probably lack some of those things at some level. But, social media news and everybody's ability to communicate so much brings it more visible now. I just wish that we used all these technology related things for better purposes, kind
yes,
of like what you're doing today. So thank you.
correct. Yes. And that's what's so important to me. You keep bringing up community and connection. And where's my little card? Did I put it back up? Oh, here it is. So, are you familiar with Danielle Laporte?
No.
Okay, she did this book, and it's called Desire Mapping. And she has all these questions that you go through, and you figure out what your core desired feelings are, right? So that you can bring that feeling into your life at any time. And mine are joy, passion, humility, connection, community, and grace. Right? So you can use them to make decisions for yourself. Like, should I do this? Well, you just run down your little list. Will it bring me joy? Will it bring me passion, connection, community? If it's not leaning towards any of those things, it's probably not a good idea for me to take this on. It keeps you really honest with what you want your life to feel like. But it's interesting to me that you keep bringing up connection and community several times now, as something that those of us who have dealt with addictions, we need that to keep us strong. And there it is right there. Those two of my core desired feelings.
It's so ironic. My background prior to recovery was executive assistant in the nonprofit sector for almost, 15 years. And then I transitioned into the biopharmaceutical manufacturing space and regulatory compliance and support. And so I've had a lot of corporate and, kind of business like, I wouldn't call it self help, but leadership development, continuous quality improvement. And after coming into recovery, and I, despise the 12-step program that I affiliate with now, because
I
I
have
was
a
just
real problem
convinced.
with it too. It doesn't work for
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I felt, so much was cultish, or I had to convert in some way. And honestly, if you take any spirituality component away and just look to steps in literature, it's the root of all these other, spin-off kind of, leadership development and betterment and self-improvement things. And I just pulled up the Brene Brown values chart, and so I hand this out when I do work with folks, and I use that exercise, like, it's pick three. Can you really just pick three? Or really, can you get down to one? Like, can you identify your one value? And that's really, really difficult, but it's important. And this kind of comes with the self-improvement through recovery or non-recovery, but learning what values and feelings are, learning that anger is a secondary emotion. It's a combination of things. Anger isn't just a go-to, just like happy isn't a go-to. Like, these are combination effects. And it's important to know your words, and language is so important. Yeah, and values are, I had it. I was the site director at Healing Springs Recovery and Outreach
Mhm.
Center in Saratoga Springs before coming to Vermont, and it's just what I had on the wall. We had one sign that said, "How could we help with your recovery today?" And right below that, it was the three-part equation. For recovery, it was purpose plus community plus connection. And I've carried that, into the work here in Vermont, and it's nothing I created. It's just really good sound math in my book. I was never good at math, but this is one equation I can do.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I feel like, yeah, emotions are my favorite math as well. And making all those connections, and like you said, knowing your words is really important too, because it's when you're not falling back on how you used to bury your words, right? When you get into those difficult conversations, my husband and I just yesterday, he pulled set off a trigger in me, and I get to that place, and it's like I have to step back and I have to breathe for a minute, and I have to really come from the place of, okay, he didn't pull the trigger on purpose, right? Who would want to step into this? So how do I communicate now so that he understands that I don't blame him for pulling the trigger, right? Triggers are going to happen, but this is what you just saw and this is what you just heard, and can we talk about it? It doesn't It's so hard because I don't want that my reactions to become the focus, right? Because really the conversation that we were having is the important conversation, and we need to get back to that healthily. It's work, and I'm not, and it's never done, and I'm not saying this in a victim-like way. I think that it's something that needs to be said so that when other people are there too, you you're not getting it right. It's just hard for this time.
It resonates so much. I was on a phone call with my computer web marketing folks right before this meeting, And he had never disclosed that he was a person in recovery or that he has family members and everything else. And he was talking to me about his brother, and how this Thanksgiving is really different. And they've been trying to be supportive and all this other stuff. And, before he told me that he was in recovery, I said, I said, not everybody realizes what it's like for a person in recovery to get up and start their day and everything that it really kind of takes additionally to, that norm of, being able to interact and deal with people, loved ones, work folks, just general community. I said, if your assessment is that your brother's doing well and he's doing good, I said, I want you to know he's doing really, really great. He's doing really great. And then he said, yeah, he said, my recovery was completely different. He's like, I basically, had a medical issue. The doctor said, you can drink and die or you can stop. And he's like, it's been over 5 years. I didn't think about it. And it's like, well, were you an alcoholic? It's that's the real question. His brother has, other issues, but that was, the question is, it wasn't a question, it was a statement, and it was the acknowledgement that, yeah, it takes extra. It's a lot of extra. I get up a little extra in the morning. I know what I have to do extra around my normal routine, to support my family and my job and everything else, to take care of me so that I'm the person that other people recognizes and can identify with. So I'm not that monstrous, we don't want to go there.
Right, right. But it's always there.
And you
For
know what?
me.
It's like grief dawn, and it's like anything else in this bullshit hold on pain, and screw you, it does not. It evolves. It takes a different shape. It's false advertisement if you think that this is, going to be great. Plenty of shit happens to me on the norm. I mean, I'm running an organization that lost a tremendous amount of funding. I'm supporting centers that have lost funding and resources. My kids are 15 and 17. I'm a single parent. I could, jump on that box all day of identify me and start me a GoFundMe page. But you know what? I got a phone call, a couple of weeks ago from my ex-husband who, hasn't heard or seen that from us in like 5 years. And he was clearly drunk because it was 1:30 in the morning. And I said, the best thing that you could know is that everything that I have today was, the conscious choice to not be with you. And my alcoholism didn't kick in until, almost 10 years after we were already divorced. So it's just a matter of, you have to be able to be resilient enough to take care of yourself and know what you need, recovery or non-recovery, just I think as women that we need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And then being women in recovery, it takes a lot to ask for help. And it takes a lot for us to put the needs of our kids and everything else, the things that we do, into such a bubble to ask for that help. When we get it, it hold on to it. It really matters. Like, and people make mistakes. And I'm only speaking for myself. For me, when I was really ready and all in, like, I live it all day. I don't need to blow sunshine up your ass about apologies and everything else. You can look at my life, you can look at what I do. And that's what I told my family, and my children when I came into recovery, that, I'm going to just show you every day the kind of person that I am.
Right, right. And I'd also like to speak to, as women, we also deal with our natural state is to nurture all the things, right? We nurture ourselves last, most of all. But
Hmm.
there's also, I feel like, as a woman, there are things that people want me to put up with or take on that are not conducive to staying in my recovery bubble. And they think that there is nothing wrong with, like, you, but that's your cousin, or, and you know how they are. You've lived with them your whole life. You just have to put up with it. No, you need to go to the event. When I am screaming inside saying, I cannot go to this event and love myself, right? If I love myself and I want myself to be successful and have my head on my shoulders tomorrow in a really good way, I cannot subject myself to this. That puts you in a very hard position, and and puts you in that position where people think now it's not about your recovery, that you've become like being a non-smoker saying, "Oh," lecturing people. It's not a I'm not telling you where to go. I'm not telling you how to handle these people. I'm telling you what I need for my own well-being is to not go and not associate right now with this person. I'm not saying they're a horrible person. I'm not saying any of these things. How do we handle those things? Because I come up against that, and that's the hardest thing for me.
Directly. That's the biggest thing is, and especially if it's somebody who has known you throughout your recovery and claims to be somebody who supports your recovery, I remind them of that. Um, my mother hates that we don't have family holidays. My sister and I have not spoken since I've come into recovery. We have two different positions on it. Our children, are not close like they used to be. And I got a lot of guilt trips over holidays and funerals and different things. And there are some things, funerals are one thing that I will never miss. Nobody will ever stand in my way of my ability or my desire to go and say goodbye to somebody I hold dear. Nearly every other occasion or social interaction, there is not one thing in the world that is worth me regretting time I just gave to somebody and being miserable or not feeling good about myself or resentful. Avoiding resentments are a huge thing. And being able to acknowledge that is a boundary. If you have a boundary that I don't care if they're blood related or not, and that's really difficult for people to understand.
Yes,
But
it
it's one of
is.
the most important and valuable ones because you cannot be well where you got ill, and you cannot stay well where it's unhealthy. And this unrealistic, selfish need for other people to have everybody in one area, knowing that everybody is miserable and don't want to be there and what they're really thinking and who's going to have that extra drink and who are you waiting for it to go off and who's going to be the first one to leave. All those scenarios are avoided when I'm not present. And then I can hear it was a great time and say congratulations, or I can hear it was an awful time and say, I'm glad I was doing whatever I chose to be, but I will no longer be subject to people pleasing, or if it doesn't have to do with my ability to perform and receive a paycheck, there's very little that's going to get into my way of my boundaries in any decisions that I've made. And even when it comes to my job, if there's something that I, am uncomfortable with, I do seek out support and guidance, and I talk to my board or others and let them know how and why I'm feeling. I did not invest the time in myself. I didn't lose the life I had, and I mean really lost the life that I had, to have this second chance and not make the most of it. And there's not any person in the world that I value more than my peace of mind to give that to.
Thank you. I think it's really important for people to hear this. So I know it's important for me to hear it on an ongoing basis. It doesn't
Even
change
anger
how.
passes. I've never ever, after this experience has happened personally or with someone that I'm mentoring or working with, where they elected not to go to an event and there was a standing resentment or something got worse from them not attending. 80% of the time, it was a shit show and their presence wasn't even missed, or it only mattered to the person that was asking them to go, not the group.
Right.
If you are not the person hosting the event, it just doesn't work that way. That's, nobody does things because of us. They do that because of themselves. And, just it, take your ego out of it. You're really just not that relevant. We're all a bunch of ants. No one of us has that power.
Right.
So, you're not all that on the day of the special occasion where that occasion is going to be made or broken because of your presence. So whoever's
Right.
out there listening, you're just not all that. Go make a cup of coffee and send a card.
Correct. Correct. Because that event is not about me ultimately. So whoever the event is about may have a passing thought, maybe not even on that day that I was there or not.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah, it's very important because as women, we get tugged so many places, and boundaries are valid, needed, and are to be respected.
Yeah, and value the relationship. If you can appreciate, or whomever out there is in the scenario and can appreciate that you want to be somewhere but you can't, like you're making that struggle, reach out to the host or whoever that person is being celebrated, and send flowers, send an extra message, let them know that you love them no less. Right now you just need to really love yourself more to keep what you have.
Right. Right. And who wouldn't understand that? And right.
If you
Um,
receive that phone call, that's the first thing. You got to put yourself in the receiver's position. If you were hosting something and somebody called you and said, look, Uncle Jack is coming, and you know how it goes, honestly, what are you going to say? Are you going to be like, oh, we'll keep Jack in the corner, don't worry about it, you're going to miss out? Or are you going to be like, you know what, yeah, you've had your runs over the years, like, you want to get together for pie or leftovers after? Yeah. There's
right.
always another way.
Right. Right. Is there anything else you want to speak to that you think is a really important that needs to be said
Yeah,
today?
nobody brings you a casserole when your parents or your kid's an addict. I mean, like, let's talk about things on the norm. Everybody asks how everybody else's family members are doing. If there's a health condition, right? Don't leave out the people that aren't present, especially the children of. If you're sitting with your sisters and brothers, it's not the day to rag on the family members that aren't there because of bad decisions. Better use that time to find out how your loved one is doing. How are they handling things? Talk about things they haven't had the opportunities to. Get their minds off of it. It doesn't have to be a deep thing, but when's the last time somebody asked them what kind of perfume they like, or what was their favorite flower in the garden this year? It just, it needs to be normalized because there's too many. I stopped keeping track, honestly, after about 20 people I know have passed away over COVID, related to either suicide or addiction related issues. It it's my, I'm just more, I think that the ratio of people, susceptible to these things in my life are higher than those. So I don't think it's a norm, but it we have to be there for one another. There's no magic cure coming. The cure is connection and community, honesty, and love. Just, love thy neighbor and make it real.
Right. Okay. So the whole my conversations with friends comes from that place.
Yeah.
But on my little dead end road, how do I reach out to my neighbors in a safe way? Because it's not like I can knock on their door and have a conversation right now because COVID. But
Mhm.
how do we make those inroads and those connections with people? There's people on my road. I've been here 6 years. I don't know by name. How do I
Yeah.
say, hey, how are you doing?
Boy, in your little neighborhood, if it were me, I'd be out there like delivering baked goods from a socially distanced place.
Okay, because that's exactly what I wanted to
Yeah,
do.
yeah, I would be like I mean, I bake because we're friends outside of here, but I mean, I have shipped more boxes of cookies and different things, but just like little, very safely wrapped, and you can knock and back off and leave it for them and stand on their stoop and say, hey, it's been a year for me. I just wanted to come out and say hi. And I'm
Awesome.
seeing, we really need stickers that say your recovery is welcome here, like plastered all over the place, businesses, houses, and everything else. But then you can, that's how those chase the rainbow and find the heart things started. But, get to know your neighbors, leave on a certain color light in a window at night if you need something. And, notes, bring back leaving notes, thinking of you.
That's a good idea. I think the whole the little dropping of a cute little package of baked goods along with a note saying, if you need me, here's how to reach me. If
Yeah.
you don't have access to food or whatever and you need something, please reach out. If I can't help you, I have resources.
Yeah.
Let's I think that's a great thing to do. And I certainly look forward to being on the other side. And I would love to have on my little dead end road, have a block party where we just all bring a table out to the middle of the street and make a big table and everybody bring in their food and finally get to know each other on more than a wave as we drive by basis. I think that's the biggest pull I have from this ongoing century now of a year of not being able to reach out and touch anyone.
I remember growing up, and I think, it's completely generational, and time has just taken so much away from the norms. But, we used to live in the village of Scotia, and everybody would be out on their porches in the morning, having coffee together and just riding the bikes up and down the street. And yeah, like having those like little gatherings, but it's cultivating community. So just bring it back. You got nothing but time right now.
Exactly. I'll make a plan. Also, baking those baked goods, totally
Yeah, those
doing
always
it.
go over well.
Exactly. But I was like, well, maybe not everybody likes food as much as you, Dawn. But it's always
I
my go too.
beg to differ. Yeah. And if not, they can give it to somebody. So it's the thought that counts.
There you go. They'll still get the note. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing today?
Just thank you so much for, starting up this initiative and reaching out. It's great to see you. I'm sorry that we haven't connected, outside of the Zoom world, but we'll stay safe for a little while longer. And um, New York State is just, wonderfully outfitted with recovery centers. And if you would like to support the work that I do, Vermont Recovery Network is the entity that I work with. And we are completely grant and nonprofit funded. So please do reach out. The support goes directly to people in recovery.
Awesome. I want to thank you so much for being so willing to jump into this conversation with me. I really pick the people that I want to have the conversations with carefully, and I start at like my top person I'd love to have the conversation with. And I was so happy when people were like, yeah, let's do it. I was like, oh, I don't even have to go down a list. This is awesome. So
No, it has to happen.
thank you so much for being willing to have this conversation with me. You've left your details, but if anybody didn't write that down, you know how to find me, dawnscannell.com. Reach out and I'll put you in touch with Fawn. We'll do what we need to do. Have a wonderful turkey day.
Gobble till you wobble.
I'll be doing that and thinking of you. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so
Take
much,
care.
Fawn.